Okay, I think we're getting this started. Hello to this personal development session today. The subject of today's session is the imposter syndrome. My name is Camilla Klebner. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oldenburg in Germany. My own research is at the intersection of economic geography, innovation studies, and transition research. Today's session is on the imposter syndrome. That is something that I'm really keen to hear about because it's something that I've definitely experienced myself in the past a lot, and I know that it's very, very common amongst researchers in general. But before we get to that, let me just say a few words about our wonderful host today, the RSA. The Regional Studies Association is a global and interdisciplinary network of urban and regional research, development, and policy. The RSA as an organization supports its members with the latest research, funding schemes, networking, and publishing opportunities and spaces to grow research and careers and networks. In response to this ongoing global crisis, the RSA board has put in place initiatives to support its members and also the wider community. So this personal development webinar is one of those initiatives. Another one is the Region Cities Industry webinar, for example. You can find more details on these initiatives on the RSA website. There's also a new app called the RSA Hub, which enables you to organize your attendance at RSA events and also to network. Just before we begin, a few housekeeping things. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the RSA launch for members. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. And if you like to tweet about these kinds of events, please use the hashtag RSA webinar when you tweet about it. So with all that, let me get to today's speaker. We're very happy to have Hugh Carnes here today. Hugh Carnes is actually recognized internationally as a public speaker, educator, and researcher. He regularly lectures at universities across the world and has recently returned from lecture tours of the UK and the US, including lectures at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Berkeley, and Stanford, presumably from the comfort of your living room. Without any further ado, I would like to hand over to you, Hugh. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Camilla. I'll just share my screen. All right. So welcome along. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to talk to you about the imposter syndrome. So let's do a little brief introductions for starters. So a bit about me. If I was there in person, if we were all there in person, that's what I would look like. But of course, we don't do many things in person these days. But very hard for me to be there in person anyway, because I'm here in Australia. That's a map of Australia, but it's showing all the Aboriginal language groupings across the country here. And I'm down here in Adelaide. Adelaide is at the bottom of South Australia. And we're in the traditional lands of the Kaurna Aboriginal people, the traditional owners of the land here. And it's currently 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday evening here in Australia. So this is the late shift for me. I have a few jobs here in Adelaide. One is at a university called Flinders, doing some lecturing, researching on the topic of self-management. And the imposter syndrome really gets in the way of that. And I'm going to talk about the psychology of that. For anybody listening to the accent, you'll think it's not a very convincing Australian accent. And that's right, because I'm from a place called Sligo, and that's over there on the west coast of Ireland. And my degree, a long time ago now, was in agricultural science at University College Dublin. And then moved out of that into education for a while, and then from there into psychology. So I moved around a bit. So that's me. It'd be good to find out a bit about you as well. And I'm just going to get you to type into the chat just your name and where you are right now. And that could be town or city or country, but also are you in the family room or on campus, or have you got a cat crawling over your desk or wherever? So just to say hello to everybody, find the chat and tell us who you are and where you are for a moment. Some people have already done that. Just got started on it. So good morning to you from Isa from Romania and someone in Salzburg, Francis in Indonesia, Alan, County Tyrone, not far from Sligo, yeah, just up the road. Yep. Excellent. We've got people all over the world, someone in India, in Luxembourg, in Sweden, yeah, all over the place. Camilla is in Vienna and Lexi is in sunny Sussex. some Pedro is in Valencia in Spain. So that's one of the nice things about this online world, is we can all be in different places, but still get together in a form like this. So this is good. All right, so I'm going to talk about the imposter syndrome, and I'm going to give you just a brief idea about it. Someone's getting the Scottish borders with sheep and chickens and dog running around outside. Sounds good. Richard in Aberdeen. So I'm going to give you some famous examples, and as I'm going through this, you might notice the odd imposter in some of these pictures as well. But Paul Newman, he was a house painter before he became an actor, and he said he always had the fear that one day someone would push through the crowd, grab him by the arm and say, "It's over, it was all a mistake, you're coming back to paint houses." Despite being one of the most recognized people on the planet, still thinking, I don't know how I do this. Michelle Obama, she wrote an autobiography a few years ago, and she said, "I still have a little imposter syndrome. It never goes away. It's sort of like you're actually listening to me." It doesn't go away, that feeling, "Oh, I don't know if the world should take me seriously." And I'm sure some of you have that experience when somebody introduces you and they say, "We'd like to introduce the expert." And you're thinking, "Me? You're talking about me? I'm not an expert. I don't know anything about this." So very common. So I suppose that I'll go back into the history of it. And I suppose the first one is from Greek mythology. It's the Achilles heel story. And when Achilles was born, his mother wanted to make him invulnerable to harm. So the idea was you bring him down to the river Styx, and if he gets covered in the water, he'll be invulnerable to harm. So she did, but she held him by his heel, and that part didn't get covered. So then he went off and fought in lots of battles, won lots of them, but then one day he got struck by a poisoned arrow in the heel, and he died. And that's the Achilles heel, which is there's one fatal flaw, and when they find out about that, it's all over. You know, that exam you did 10 years ago where it didn't go very well, or something you applied for didn't get, or something went wrong. And when they realize that, no matter how successful you are, they're going to realize you're a fraud or shouldn't be here. However, the terms imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon, more recent than that. It really started in 1978 in the United States at Georgia State University. And there were two researchers there, Pauline Clancy and Susan Ims, and they were working with senior women at the university. And they noticed this strange thing. All these senior women would say, "I shouldn't be here. There's been some sort of mistake." And they thought it was a bit strange. And they do what all academics do or researchers do when they notice something unusual. They said, "We'll write a paper." So they did. So they wrote a paper called The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention. And it was published in 1978. And what happened? It became really popular because a lot of people read it and said, "I feel like that too." And what they'd really done is put a name on something that a lot of people were feeling. And it became really popular around about that time, the imposter phenomenon. And Pauline Clancy wrote a book about it called The Imposter Phenomenon, Overcoming the Fear That Haunts Your Success. And over the time, it's changed from imposter phenomenon into imposter syndrome and feelings. But the way I like to split it up is in two parts: imposter feelings and imposter syndrome. And the imposter feelings is you occasionally feel like a fraud, even though there is evidence that you're not. And so you feel like that, but there's evidence, you have qualifications, you've got experience, people are telling you you're going fine, but you still feel you shouldn't be here. And when you look at the research, about 70% of people who answer surveys would say they occasionally feel like that. And I'm suspecting many of the other 30% are probably lying, because I suspect that's a very normal thing to doubt yourself occasionally when you're doing something new or that you've not done before. Now, that is a very important number because that is the majority. Everybody thinks I'm the only one, but the reality is most people feel like that. So we'll just do a little survey here, and I'm going to get people to chat in. Have you ever felt like a fraud? Maybe we've got the other 30% here who never feel like that at all. So anybody type into chat, ever felt like a fraud? And let's see if we have a normal population here, or have we got the other weird 30%? Yep, almost every day, always, yep. And it's important to see that list, because these are other people just like you, who you think, you know, they got it all together, but they're thinking, I don't know about this. And so it's really important to really, and someone said, that's my default mood. And so really, really common on a regular basis. Now, this is probably a self-selecting group, really. If you've come to this, you're probably going to feel it. But the reality is it applies to almost everybody. So it's important, first of all, everyone thinks I'm the only one. And here we are. Well, most people feel like that. So it's important to realize that. And that's what the statistics and the research show. It's really common. Now, that's 70% occasionally feel like that. About 30% It's not the other 30%. This is a different surveys. 30% would say they consistently feel like it. It's not just every now and again. As somebody said, it's my default feeling. It's, most of the time I'm feeling like that. And that's when it becomes the syndrome. Like the thoughts, it's a whole bunch of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. For example, the thoughts could be, I can't do this. I'll be found out. Who am I to be talking to all these clever people? I just got away with it this time. The next time they're going to find out. The feelings could be feeling like a fraud, feeling anxious, feeling on edge. It's, that feeling when you're driving down the motorway and then a police car comes along with the siren on and you think, what have I done wrong? And nothing, and they just keep on going because it wasn't you at all. Or your boss or your supervisor says, we need to have a meeting. You think, what's going to happen? So that feeling on edge. And the behaviors are overworking, just work super, super hard so they don't find out, or else avoid getting found out, avoid putting yourself into situations. So let's see, most people have said they feel like it. So when do you feel like it? Like, a few examples are going to a conference, certainly an academic conference, is guaranteed to make you feel like that. Because someone's going to ask a difficult question, you're hanging around with all these clever people, you're thinking, I don't know whether I should be here. that first lecture, when you give a first lecture, you think, I'm just one page ahead of the students here, they're going to find out. First day of a PhD or a postdoc, or first day of anything really, because you're thinking, I don't know if I should be here. Ironically, winning an award, you'd imagine that would make you feel good, but winning an award often makes you feel worse because now I have to do this all the time. They're going to expect me to do more stuff all the time. So winning an award often pushes it higher, really. When you go for an interview, that's usually terrifying for most people because in the interview, you have to tell people how clever you are and how you're a quick learner and you have these wonderful abilities. And then you turn up at the job and they say, where's the quick learner? It doesn't feel natural. Even applying for things, people think, oh no, I shouldn't apply. I'm not qualified. I can't do that. It makes you feel like I shouldn't even put my name forward. So putting your hand forward are very common areas. So let's see times when you might have felt like a fraud. Anyone type into chat some of these, or maybe other times. Often having a meeting with your academic supervisor, your PI, having a meeting with your team is often can bring up these things as well. So let's see any examples. Meetings with the team, writing paper, it's guaranteed, submitting a paper because you're thinking it's going to get rejected, they're not going to like it, they'll think it's rubbish. So writing is a very big one for most people. All of the above plus always before a meeting. Yeah. Lectures, writing is a very, as I said, very common one in academia. Academic writing, because it's going to be torn to shreds. People will say horrible things about it. Yeah. When a paper comes out, yes, because now what are they going to think? They're going to find the gaps in it. Returning to academia after having worked for several years in private, when you move from one area to another, it's really common because you might have been really good at that, but now you're starting all over again. Just applied for a chair. It was the hard thing I ever did. Needed a bottle chance to get yourself even to click send. Yeah, because you think, who am I to do that? They'll think that's ridiculous. Yeah. Presenting your research to non-academics, you can hear a comment, oh, that's quite obvious. We didn't need a scientist to know that. Yeah. When I'm introduced as an expert, absolutely. When you have to stand up and they're all expecting you to know things. When I submitted my PhD and the Viva, which a couple of weeks, those haunting feelings are exhausting. Or when people introduce you, when you get your PhD, they introduce you as doctor. You think, me? I don't know. Yeah, application. So there's lots of these. So that's the imposter syndrome. Now, it's fun to talk about it, but I think it's more fun to try it out. Because when I was coming here today, I was talking to Katrina, and I said, look, I run this workshop all around the world, some of the best universities in the world. And I just wanted to find out whether the people coming along today were clever enough to hear what I had to say. So after, she could send me through some background details, your academic achievements, what you've done. And I had a look earlier on, and I'm afraid there's some disturbing news. Because there's one person here who shouldn't be here. And I'm going to call out your name now and say if you could leave, because you really shouldn't be here. I'm sorry, there's been some sort of mistake. And as I'm saying that, most people are thinking, he's talking about me. I'm the one who shouldn't be here. And that's the feeling of the imposter syndrome. The feeling that you are just one step away from being found out as a complete fraud. Now, the good news for you is I didn't check your academic backgrounds. I think that's probably illegal. But even if I had, what would I have found? You know, you've all done things, but despite that, you still feel it. And there's two things about it. The first one is it's a secret. You can never check it out. Because if you put up your hand and said, I think I'm an imposter, there's always the risk that they might say, yeah, we were thinking the same thing ourselves. So you have to sit there with a straight face and don't blink and hope nobody finds out. You know, when you're having a meeting with your department and they explain something, and then they say, now, you understand that, don't you? And we all go, oh, yes, I understand, even though they have no idea. And then you go out onto Google to try and find out what they were saying. And of course, because if you said no, you'd feel foolish. And of course, all the other people in the meeting, they're all nodding. They all know, but they don't know either. So everybody feels it, but nobody talks about it. So it's a secret. And the second thing about it is it's impervious to evidence. It doesn't matter how much evidence you're not an imposter, you're still going to feel like it. And from a psychology point of view, that is really intriguing because all of you like to see yourselves as quite rational people, researchers. If there was evidence, you believe it. But here you have evidence and you don't believe it. So what's that about? So what we have to do is we play little tricks in our brain to get rid of evidence we don't like. So I'll show you how to do it. Let's say something good happens to you. You get a compliment, or somebody says you did well, or something goes well. What we do is we misattribute our successes. Success is attributed to luck. I was lucky. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The right questions came up in the exam. That's why I got good grades. They were just, so it was luck. Now, clearly luck plays a part, but it's not the only thing. Or we say it was easy. Anybody could have done that. It was nothing special at all. And of course, it isn't easy. A very common one is to attribute success to other people. It was my supervisor. It was the team. They did it all. I didn't really do very much at all. They were just being nice to me. You know, when you get a compliment, oh, they're just being nice. They don't really think that at all. That was then. This is different. Like you had a success last year, but that's completely different from where we are now. This is a whole new situation. And the last one is really sneaky. Let's say you do quite well. Well, it was only because I worked so hard. I had to work 10 times harder than everybody else. And that just proves how stupid I am, because really you should be able to do it easily. So that's how we get rid of evidence we don't like. So I'm going to get you to type into the chat, how do you do it? How do you get rid of evidence? When people say you're going well, how do you do that? So just get you to type into the chat your strategies for getting rid of evidence you don't like very much. That sort of runs counter to the imposter syndrome. You were lucky, it was easy, they were just being nice to you. Yeah, work hard. Yeah, and that's sad because you do work hard, but you make you feel bad about that. You get a gold star for working hard. Dermot said, I recently won an award. The first thought I had was perhaps I was the only one who submitted. No one else applied. Yeah, even though that's probably not true. Luck and being nice. Yeah, they're just being nice. You're only as good as your last paper. It won't last. That's a very big one. Yeah. That was then completely different now. It's scary, but all of the above listed. Well, don't worry. That's most people as well. I try to imagine that people are trying not to hurt my feelings because they're trying to get more women. Yeah, it's a tokenism. You just because, yeah. So we use, and lucky also to have good people, the people around me. Now, all of these things have a bit of truth in them, but you have to do your bit as well. And if you attribute all your success to them, you don't get any credit yourself. And so that's when you have to go, no. So the next time somebody gives you a compliment, all you have to say is, thank you. It's not, I was lucky or anything like that. No, thank you. So what do we do about it then? Well, generally there's two approaches. One is work super hard, work 10 times harder so they don't find out, or avoid finding out. Don't put your hand up, don't apply, don't put your name forward, then they won't find out. So what I'm now going to do is give you some strategies to do about it. And I'll ask you, and I'm going to give you 7 different strategies, and we'll see. So the first strategy is realize imposter feelings are normal. Most people will occasionally feel like an imposter, especially in new situations. So when you're doing something new, when you start something, a new job, move country, move things, you're probably going to feel like an imposter. And so do at least 70% of the other people, probably more. So it's normal. And so don't feel it's something weird. And as you've seen, all those people on that list there, they're saying they feel it. So it's pretty normal. Number 2 is realize feelings are not facts. You can feel something even strongly, very compellingly, and it might not be true. Look at the facts. I always think it's quite peculiar talking to a group of researchers and saying, look at the facts. So if you're telling me you're an imposter, well, show me the facts. Show me where you've lied, where you've downloaded your qualifications. Prove it. So look at the facts. Number 3 is mind your language. And that means watch what you say. So like when somebody says something nice to you, don't discount your achievements. Just say, thank you. That's all you got to do. When someone says, well done, good presentation, don't go, oh, it was nothing. No, just say, thank you. That's all you have to do. Because the problem is they hear it, but first you also hear it yourself. And then you start to believe maybe it was nothing. Number 4 is everyone needs to create a fact file or a brag file. And a fact file is a file that contains evidence about your achievements. It's all the good things that happen to you. Because you need that. I'll give you an example. I run lots of these workshops, and I'll often get emails saying, look, that was good, thanks very much. But every now and again, I'll get an email saying, that was rubbish, that was no good. Now, if you get 100 emails and 99 of them are good and one bad one, what do you focus on all evening? The one bad one. So when I get that one bad one, what I do is go to the fact file and look at the 99 good ones and then say, that person's weird. They're wrong. Because otherwise you start to believe them. You know, if you get the student evaluations of teaching things or whatever, think, oh, look, one unhappy student, you're focusing on that. Or if you hand in work to a supervisor and you get lots of good comments, but one bad one, you tend to focus in on the negative one. So that's when you need to have a fact file or a brag file, or all the good things that happen to you, so that you can look at it when you're feeling like an imposter, you can look at that. Number 5 is know your imposter moments. There are going to be times when you're going to feel like an imposter. That when you speak in public, you know, when you stand in front of a group of people, certainly when you write, that's going to be really common. Anytime you sit down, especially academic writing, you're going to have all these imposter feelings. Or very commonly, when you make a mistake. When you get something wrong, you're going to get flooded with all those imposter feelings. So you need to get ready for them. Number 6 is get used to your imposter feelings, because they don't go away. But you get used to them. People say, how do I get rid of it? And I'm saying, no, you don't get rid of it. You just get used to them. And then the last one, and this is really important, is at the end of the day, you need to be brave and take action. And I like this quotation. It said, a great deal of talent is lost to the world for want of a little courage. I know people, I'm sure you know people as well, who have great abilities, great gifts, but they won't take the risk. They won't put their hand up. They won't apply. And that's really sad for them. But it's also sad for the rest of us, really, because you have all these abilities and they miss out, and we miss out on that as well. So they're the 7 strategies for dealing with it. There are probably others, but they're the ones I think that are fairly common and useful. So I might get people just to chat. Katrina's asked for questions. I'll take those in a minute. I have one final little slide I'll give, and then I'm going to finish up my bit. I'll just go through that slide. Yeah, I'm going to show you how we take good ideas, good feedback, and turn it into bad feedback so quickly. And I don't know whether any of you remember Waldorf and Statler. They were in the Muppet Show. And this is about a 10-second little clip, and it shows you how you go from brilliant to awful so quickly. And we do this in our mind all the time.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good, though.
It could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!
Hey, boo!
Boo!
So that's how you can go from brilliant to awful in about 10 seconds. And we do that in our brain all the time. You know, you get good feedback, you feel good for about a second, and then, but it could be better, it could be, and you go in all that scenarios. That's when you have to look at the thinking process and go, hang on, no, it was good, rather than automatically looking for the negative or the difficult part. So I'm going to leave it there. I think now it's handed back to Camilla. If any people have any questions or you want to ask anything about it, now is the time to do that.
Thank you, Hugh. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I can't see any questions.
It was nothing. It was nothing. Anybody could do it. Somebody else. It wasn't me at all.
It is not true. I can't see any questions in the Q&A box at the moment, but I might take chair's prerogative and ask you a question of my own. I think many of our early careers researchers like myself are increasingly kind of at the stage of their career getting into a position where they have to supervise others. And they may be group leaders. If you when we identify these kinds of symptoms that you've just described with someone else, how can we best support them? And what should we avoid?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and what normally you'll do is, oh no, you're not an imposter, you're great, you're really good, and ironically that makes it worse, because now they're thinking you fooled me too, I fooled you as well, and you're thinking, oh, you're great, and you're thinking, no, I'm not really great. So that doesn't really help at all. Telling the person how brilliant they are just makes it worse in some sense. So what you have to do is a bit like what I've just done there, is let's look at the facts. Well, hang on, you did get a paper published, you did these things, that's pretty good. Look at other people and then look at the evidence rather than just saying, because they'll go, you're just being nice to me, you're not really being true at all. So what works best is more facts and evidence rather than it's great. It's just, so look at the evidence. Well, actually, you're just in the early stage of your career, you've had 2 papers published, that's really good. Look at other people haven't had. And so looking at evidence rather than just telling people they're great doesn't work very well because they don't believe it. And so now, even with the facts, that's hard to change. The other thing that's really helpful is to talk about your own experiences of feeling like an imposter. I feel like that too. And then they go, oh, you wouldn't feel like that. You're really clever. And so then you realize everybody, and by talking about it, it makes it more normal for people. So I think that's the strategy.
That's great advice, Hugh. We have 3 more questions come through the chat and the Q&A box. One question is, do you have any advice for PhD students to avoid those kinds of feelings coming up in the middle of the PhD Viva exam?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say, and it came up with a question in the chat as well, is academia and research almost guarantees people feel like an imposter, because research is a very critical environment. People constantly tell you what's wrong. I often say researchers are trained killers. Your job is to find the gaps in things. When you read an article, you go, they didn't do very much here. So it's called critical thinking, which is really good, but it means you're always looking for the gaps and the flaws. And then we do that to other people and they do it to us, but you also do it to yourself. And so it's constantly looking for that. And so what you have to do is almost train yourself out of that, which is, yeah, that's critical, but also you have to be kind to yourself occasionally as well, which is, actually, I'm doing okay, I'm doing fine here and so forth. But yeah, so a PhD, very common, because when people are doing a PhD, they don't know what they're doing. You're trying, you're making it up, you're doing the best you can, but you don't know. And you're going to have all those doubts and worries going through your brain. And that's when you're doing your PhD Viva, what you have to realize is, I've done 3 or 4 years to get here. I've worked hard. I haven't been wasting my time. This is the way it is. I don't know everything, but I actually did work hard. And if they work hard and pay attention, you'll be fine. You might not know everything, but you have to trust that it'll be okay. And equally, if you were an imposter, somebody would have spotted it by now. Your professor or your supervisor might have worked it out. The chances of you fooling everybody for the last 3 or 4 years are not very high when you think about it, really.
Thank you, Hugh. Alison in the Q&A box asked, do rewards help? So rewarding ourselves when we do have success, does that help to ameliorate feelings?
Yeah, well, definitely, yeah, because what academics do is when something good happens, when you get a paper accepted, you feel good for about 30 seconds and then now on to the next thing. I got to change, I got to do other things. So it's constantly, you don't really get much satisfaction for what you achieve. So yes, when something goes well, you definitely need to reward, celebrate, tell people, feel good about it, because that then lets the evidence get in. So I definitely encourage people to reward themselves more, to reward their colleagues. When a colleague has a paper published, buy them a morning tea or a coffee or something like that to feel good. And you have to acknowledge achievements and that lets it go in. If you get a paper published and nobody says anything, you go, mustn't be that important. And so the evidence doesn't get in. So yeah, absolutely, rewarding is a great idea.
Thank you. Sally asked, when do you, according to your knowledge, when does imposter syndrome kind of start? Because children are often very confident and then it just seems to dissipate over time.
Yeah, look, people often ask, where does it come from? And as with everything in psychology, go back to your early childhood. It'll be in particular, it'll be the way you learn to deal with mistakes when things go wrong. If something goes wrong, do people say, oh, that's very bad, that's dangerous. Oh, and basically, as a young child, you work out, if I make a mistake, they're not going to love me anymore. They won't like me. Or equally, even if you get the thing, if you do well and people say, oh, aren't you great? You're so clever. Then you think, I have to be clever all the time. And then you think, if I stop being clever, they won't like me anymore. So a lot of it is how you deal with mistakes and achievements and the message you get early in your life. And so again, what would you do then? Well, what parents, I suppose, do is acknowledge that people are good, worthwhile people, regardless of their achievements. You're okay. You're accepted as you are. If you do well, that's great, but we'll still love you if you make a mistake as well. And slowly you realize it's not nice making mistakes, but you don't get kicked out of the house or people don't stop liking you. And so early in life, and again, for people who have young kids, that's the message you need to get across to them.
Dorota here has a really good question, I think. If one of the strategies is actually overworking, then it might be that our co-workers perceive our syndrome as quite beneficial for them, and then actually kind of indirectly support the imposter syndrome, make it worse.
Yeah, well, and certainly the people around you can make it worse as well. Like they'll be critical of you, or because you're working hard, it suits them as well. So yeah, sometimes an environment can make it worse for you as well. And so that's when you have to work out, what am I going to do? Not what other people do, but what am I going to do as well? So absolutely, the people around you can contribute to it and make it worse for you. And especially in research, if people, like a supervisor is very harsh criticism, that's going to hurt your ego and your self-esteem, and it's going to have all those doubts. And again, if there are any supervisors here, you just have to be very careful when you're giving feedback. And remember, I also remember there's a human being behind those words, and you have to be a bit careful about the way you say things, because you can really crush a person's ego, not even meaning to do it.
Thank you, Hugh. These are great suggestions, great answers to these questions, and I think it has been a really, really useful session for many of us. At this point, I think it remains for me to say thank you so much, you Karen, for giving me your time. Thank you to the organizers, especially Katerina and Alex today, who enabled this session from the RSA. And of course, to all of you at home, the attendees, for asking such interesting questions and for participating in this session. There are more free sessions like this one, so personal development sessions, but also other webinars scheduled. You can find more information and you can register for free on the RSA website. There's also information on membership and its benefits, and membership actually works by considering career stage and geography for you. So there's information on that on the website, so please have a look. With that, it remains for me to say thank you to all of you and goodbye.